This is a brief introduction to the life of the Apostle Paul. The early story that we have of Paul, during the time of Tiberius, somewhere between 14 to 37 AD, Paul was born in Tarsus in Cilicia, which is in present day Tarsus in southeast Turkey. Paul was obviously from a family that had some means, since Paul was able to be sent to Jerusalem and was able to be trained as a Pharisee under a Rabbi Gamaliel I. And Paul describes himself as someone who was zealous for God. So a couple of things here about this. Being a Pharisee means that Paul was devout towards certain traditions, certain practices that emphasized ceremonial cleanliness and purity. Pharisees were intent on distinguishing themselves from Gentiles, and wanted other Jews as well to be focused on those laws and those practices that would help keep the boundaries between Gentiles and Jews very distinct. So here Rabbi Gamaliel was one of the leading rabbis of the time, and Paul's parents were able to afford to send, first of all, travel is expensive, but to send their son to study under Rabbi Gamaliel. And the fact that that Paul refers to himself as zealous for God, this doesn't mean that he was violent, but it does mean that he was intent, he was serious, he was highly committed to the practice of the law. So being zealous for God is kind of code word for I was very devout at following God's commands, following God's Torah, being a strict Pharisee. He was present and supportive of the stoning of Stephen, as we're told in Acts 8:1, and as Paul recounts in Acts 22:20. On his way to arrest Christians in Damascus, he encounters the risen Jesus and is blinded. So again, the fact that he was wanting to arrest Christians means that he was very intent, very serious about bringing individuals who may be somehow or another a threat to Jewish identity, since the people that he primarily went to arrest were Hellenistic Jews, that is, Jews who spoke Greek. And if Stephen's speech is any indication, there may be some kind of tension with the temple. And so Paul saw that position of Stephen and of other Hellenistic Jews as somehow a threat to Jewish identity, Jewish distinctiveness, and he wanted to stop it. But he encounters the risen Jesus and is blinded. During this time that he's blinded, he goes to Damascus, and after 3 days, a Christian by the name of Ananias restores Paul's sight to him and teaches him about Jesus, and he is converted. Paul then preaches in Damascus, but must escape from angry non-Christian Jews, and then he goes to Jerusalem, and he at least has a limited encounter with the apostles there. After initial cold reception by disciples in Jerusalem, Paul boldly preaches Jesus and argues with Hellenistic Jews until once again his life is threatened. This time in Jerusalem, and the disciples send Paul to Tarsus. So in other words, they want him out of the area. So the little that we know about Paul before his travels, before his work as an apostle, at least someone who is associated with the church in Antioch, this gives us a brief introduction to that the early stage, the formative stage of Paul's life.